we're going to be speaking, we have 3 speakers today about logging without password authentication. Some using Bitcoin technology, others something slightly different. Right up first, we have Bharath Rao. He's the CEO of Bitcoin Futures Exchange, 10 years Wall Street experience. He'll go ahead and introduce himself a bit more, but he's going to be giving us a talk on Loginless authentication. Everyone, thank you. Let's welcome Bharath.
Yeah, so I've been doing Bitcoin for about 4 years. I've been in finance for a while. I'm an active trader. Also been working on Wall Street in my past life. I've been in the bank for 5 years, and I'd like to basically So this is basically a picture of, this is a graphic from Information is Beautiful that sort of tries to quantify the size and magnitude of security breaches. And most of these breaches, in one way or the other, involve leakage of passwords. Admin passwords and user passwords. And once the data is released, or escapes the control of the organization, that unfortunately leads to leakage of user data, including the password result. So passwords are bad. You guys can ask the question by show of hands: how many people are technical here? How many have written code in the last? Okay, so you guys know the issues with passwords. The real issue with passwords is that humans are not a good source of entropy, and they usually don't like to remember too many passwords. Email or come into the possession. We use a database to correlate the same user from different leads using their email address as the key and so on. There have been attempts for passwordless authentication for a long time. Actually, passwordless authentication is not new at all. And today, if you search, you find a few which are based on, some of them are based on token passing, basically email or SMS. So essentially, what it does is it funds the authentication to your email system. And then it sends you a token in your email, you click on it and so on. None of this is secure, unfortunately, because email and SMS are stored in private systems and have no inherent security. They can be intercepted, modified, and there are some apps. If you have a smartphone, there are apps that will let you log in without a password. They have their own issues, which I will not go into right now at the same time. And the last authentication. When you know password login is such a hassle, and they have all these problems, you should expect a rush to adopt this technology. But adoption has been very slow, and in many places they've actually rolled it back. The reason they rolled it back is because of user resistance. So apparently, users don't really like to open their app and do something. They would rather, if they have to do something, they'd rather type in the password. So they ended up rolling it back in some cases. And in other cases, the security was not provably as secure as their previous technology. So before we, so it looks like every product manager's worst nightmare or fear is creating a cool product that nobody wants. It's cool technology, it looks great, it works great, but there's no adoption, right? This happens a lot. For example, Google social networking effort and so on. And the question is, the real issue is, you have to understand the problem. You have to understand what the whole logging process does. what it is for. What does identity mean? With all these tech people, can I ask someone to tell me something that there's knowledge, but anyone else? What is the identity of a thing? Yes. That's very good. Thank you. So there's a story of Lithuanian farmer. I say Lithuanian because no one will not try to be in the audience, right? Is there someone? Okay. So basically, this farmer claims that he has an axe in his family for 20 generations. 20 generations. Now, over time, but it is the same axe, right? If everything has changed, what is it that has not changed? What is not changed is its identity. So identity is that which threads together everything that happens to it. This is what we use identity for. When many of you are so everyone has this concept of identity. And it's not just about people, it's also about things. Farmer will look at his axe and he knows which axe he's talking about, even though he doesn't have a serial number or anything like that. So the reason we need to identify things is more important than what identity is itself. Identification of something sets the context for all subsequent interactions with it. If I identify my friend correctly, I may so have different interactions. This actually is what privacy is all about. Privacy is your ability to control your interactions and exposure. This is why we need to identify. We need to identify. So identification, authentication, and privacy are sort of a tire that we are trying to enforce. So just as I said, authentication is a prerequisite for private interactions. When you meet people, all this is automatic. When over the computer, it's a different problem. Now I want to show you how powerful your recall is, everyone here. So please indulge me for 10 seconds. Close your eyes and listen to my voice. Please close your eyes. Think of her voice. Would you recognize the sound and the timbre of her voice? Think of her expression, an expression she makes, a facial expression, without saying anything, but it communicates something. Open your eyes. What you did right now was a very powerful recall. And you did it automatically, without actually having to even think about it. And this is multi-factor because this actually encompasses a whole different set of your senses. The only issue with this is it requires a very complicated brain that can process symbolic information and put it together and relate it, without any effort. Unfortunately, it doesn't scale. You probably don't remember the homeless guy who was, asking for quarters on the way here, right? It scales to about 150. Does anyone know the significance of 150? Dunbar number is correct. Actually, it's a lot more than that when it comes to objects, but it basically doesn't scale to a huge size. It takes a lot of time to she will give you a token. That token enables her to fetch a code. So when we do authentication in the computer world, it's basically a digital version of the same thing. So when you create an account at an online service, what you've done is you have created an identity and a token that basically identifies who you are. So you created them together, so the service can authenticate you. And as time passes, you may add more information, such as security questions, documents, and so on. The issue with the documents, like passwords and so on, like passports and so on, is that in the physical world, they have physical properties, which you can use to authenticate the document. For example, your license may have a hologram. You can shine a black light on it to see it's been altered. When it's scanned and brought into the apply. And on scanned image, I'm able to replicate it hundreds of times. I'm able to find images of other people's passports, and I can send it as proof of authentication. You, the receiving party, won't know the difference. So what I have done is I've created a treasure trove of information. What if we didn't have to do that? What if we didn't have to collect that treasure trove? What if we could use your Bitcoin address as your identity? So when I make a transaction on your website, if I sign it with my Bitcoin address, I am proving that I made the transaction. If you can connect the payment to that address, you can prove the person who made the transaction actually paid for it. So this enables you to support user without holding on to any of his data. And this has been done for a while. This is password, or when you send any sort of token, including cookies or whatever, you are sending the secret across the wire to authenticate yourself. The secret is the same on both sides. This is the fundamental issue that leads to security issues. Now, if you could get away from that, if you could only send something that's public, like a public key, and come to a shared secret, common shared secret by simply knowing each other's public key, you can actually go away from all these issues. And SSH, for example, does do that. You can log in without entering a password. So one of the reasons that most loginless authentications have found resistance in the market is that they do not meet the same level of provable security as the most secure password algorithm, which is SRP. So, for example, if you that it would be hard. So what we did where I work is we used the Bitcoin address and we used the same ACDH crypto to come to a shared secret. So when a user logs in, when a user goes to your page, it generates a secret for you and it does the authentication automatically without the user having to do it. So remember, we talked about user resistance. If they have to do something, they'd rather enter passwords. You want a scheme where they have to do nothing. They go to the page, they are already authenticated. Every interaction they do is already authenticated. You don't want timeouts, you don't want state, you don't want them to type anything, you don't want them to know anything. So this is what you can do with Bitcoin technology. And basically, I'll just show you a demo in a second, but basically the idea is for every user, the server can create an individual priority. Priorities are cheap, they're just a large number. and then it uses that to authenticate to the user who also has private keys. The thing about the user is so that you can correlate the user's action with the user's identity. This user purchased this. This user paid for this using this credit. If your identity is your payment, you don't need to do that on the server side. You don't need to hold it. From the user's perspective, I gain privacy. Today I can use this Bitcoin address, tomorrow I can use something else. You cannot track me. You cannot track my purchasing habits and send me junk email about a new product, which I'm probably not even reading, right? So this is a win-win situation. So I do a very quick demo of what it looks like. This is my exchange, and prices, it's not a lot of activity right now. This is on testnet. And you can probably see here, this is my balance. And I just went to already logged in, it already authenticated me, and I can actually act right now. So let me buy something. The contract, this is my target order, this is my stop order, and this is not the cool thing. The cool thing is the fact that if I look at the messages, every message here there you go. So every message here, this is the signature. It is signed with something that is made from both the user's private key and the server's private key. So this is basically non-reputable evidence of an intentional transaction made by the user. So this gives safety for anyone. Unless you know both the user secret and the server secret for this user, you won't be able to verify transaction. So
ask questions since all your topics are so complimentary. Did you, was there anything else?
no.
Brilliant. Everyone, here's like the third or fourth slide of that. There was a list of apps and blockchain implementations of this, and Clef and BitID are both on the list. So up next we got Puey from Airbitz, and he's going to be talking about one of those on the list, BitID. And we'll just do questions at the very end. Take it away. Everyone, just welcome Paul. While Paul's getting set up, we still have lots of drinks. If anybody wants another one, they're ice cold drinks. We got a fat timer.
send Bitcoin to them, and I send the invoice.
All right, ready to start? All right, everybody. Hopefully this doesn't become too much of a broken record talking about removing passwords. My name is Paul Puey. I'm CEO and co-founder of Airbitz. We're a Bitcoin mobile app, wallet, security platform. And we're going to be talking about BitID, which was mentioned in the previous presentation, which is a Bitcoin public and private key method of authentication. So probably don't have to go down this path too much because we already know why passwords in general kind of suck. So we'll skip through this and save some time for some of the meaty stuff. Password problem. And more of why the password sucks. Easy to phish, easy to snoop, easy to forgotten, easy to use. What was mentioned a lot in the previous presentation, one server are easily used onto another server. So an attacker hacks one, and then public and private keys that we already use to access a database, which is blockchain. So the blockchain is a database. We authenticate with it, not with passwords. We authenticate it with private keys that sign messages. In the same sense, any database, every website effectively, in the end, has a database if you log into that website. And we can treat that as, in a way, another blockchain and authenticate with it in the same way. What does that look like? Challenge and responses. Effectively, a website creates a random nonce or a token, which in a way is kind of like your Bitcoin transaction, just as unsigned. That gets to the end user, they sign it with their private key and send it back as a response. That token and the response combined can be verified with a public key that was previously registered with the website. But it knows your identity. Tried and true technology. We've been using this for almost 20 years. Somewhat technical looking screen up there, but as mentioned, many technologies use the protocol SSH to connect to various servers, and it can be done without a password by simply having a private key on a machine and SSHing into a remote server that already has a public key registered, and no password is needed. So what does that actually look like on the technical details for BitID? So generally speaking, we presented with a barcode, a QR code that has a URL. Instead of it being HTTP, so BitID, it has the name of the site that you want to log into, and then a nonce. So that nonce is just a random number. That's the thing that your device, your phone, your computer signs and sends back. It sends it back to that exact URL. So what it looks like is a Bitcoin wallet with a scan QR code, sign that entire URL with a private key, and then send it back. And it uses wallet. Really well. So what does it actually feel like though? It's a lot of words, a lot of implementation details. What does it feel like? Well, our partner company for our wallet buy and sell functionality is Clef, so they've implemented it on their website. It just kind of looks like this. There's a website on my laptop. It says log in with BitID. We've got a QR code. Goes to my phone. We support BitID and Airbitz. Go to the QR code. Scan it and say, yes, I'd like to log in and verify that the URL is what I want to log into. I'm logged in, just like that. Fairly simple. But maybe you are asking, well, what if I'm on my phone? How do I scan a QR code that's on my phone with my phone? Well, that isn't a whole lot harder, actually, because actually, in a way, it's easier. That URL that's on a QR could actually just simply be a button. And in that sense, it would. Let's see if I can hit the button. Yeah. There we go. Looks like this then. Tap the button, launches into any wallet that supports BitID. Once again, you just can ask, yes, do I want to log in? And you're logged in. Hit the little back to Safari button, and I'm logged in. Implementation. You get to choose your implementation. How much security do you want for your Bitcoin? You get to choose your mobile wallet. How much security do you want for your authentication credentials? Same thing. And another beauty of this protocol, which I'm really, really excited about, are the metadata extensions. So right now, the standard BitID just simply asks you to sign this message and send it back to us. And you actually also send your public address. So if you don't already have an account, you're suddenly given one. But these extensions allow us to say, allow a website to say, I'd like additional info. I'd like your email. I'd like your name. I'd like an image of you. I'd like your social security number. And by embedding that in the QR code, use the protocol to quickly form fill or register for new accounts at a tap of a button or a scan of a QR code without having to fill out the form. It's one thing to eliminate passwords. Imagine now eliminating the filling of an entire form from multiple websites and multiple services. And that's actually enabled with the protocol as long as other websites and other wallets support it. And what's beautiful about this is this somewhat mirrors that various other apps. Because we don't have to, once we use password, we also have to give up a lot of, we don't have to manually enter information. Facebook knows our email, our name, and potentially other info, and at the tap of a button, they can give that to another party. However, be aware of the trust model. Right? Now, anytime you use that type of single sign-on, Facebook knows the website you're signed into, and that website knows something about Facebook, and your account with it. Website, just the way it connects directly to the blockchain. So great, so why haven't we been using it? This is so awesome, it's been around for 20 years. Why haven't people been using public-private key authentication? These are the laymen, not the technologists. Well, the big issue is we haven't had to secure private keys. We haven't had the tools, and we haven't had the motivation. And Bitcoin has finally given us that motivation. Motivation to know and learn, or at least know how to use or build encryption, backup technology for those keys, and then data synchronization. That's kind of where what we built in the Bitcoin community comes in. Basically, Bitcoin wallets are key managers. They manage keys for Bitcoin, but those keys can be used for a multitude of different things, including authentication. And these three wallets, Airbitz, Ledger, and MyCeiling, all support BitID protocol. And so this is what we think is very powerful about what has motivated us in this space. And so Airbitz, we're an edge security platform. We secure data. Their own data. And so we do all the following as a platform that other developers can use. But the first point of usage is for a mobile app, and that's where we think BitID really comes in. And so our mobile app integrates BitID. It does incorporate still password use, but the beauty is that one password. Our goal is to have minimal passwords. But with that, you can secure, encrypt, backup, and synchronize your private keys. And you don't have to use a password over and over. You can use Touch ID, you can use PIN-based to log in. That's automatic two-factor to lock it to your one device. And QR code to scan to register your user with BitID, and QR code to scan to log in. And so our vision of edge security and securing keys also broadens the usage to other assets. So we believe that once you build a good key manager, you can secure first Bitcoin, then authentication credentials, which we do for our high and self-authenticated era, and then other forms of digital value such as gift cards. And so we support storing and securing gift cards, purchasing gift cards, discounted gift cards within the app for users. And so if you guys want to check out and learn more about the BitID protocol, one of the original authors, Eric Larkovec, I believe. I'm always mispronounced his name, and then contributed a few of the protocol extensions myself. So if anyone's interested in getting it on their website, at GitHub, there are a few plugins for various languages. There's ones for PHP, a few others, I think one's in development for Perl, and a few others. And I think there's a WordPress plugin that needs a little bit of love, but it does work more or less. So that's it. Thanks a whole lot, folks. I'm happy to take questions after everyone talks.
Byrne, he's the CEO of Clef, which was another program that was listed on the slide earlier, and I'll just go ahead and give it to B.
I had slides, but it's exactly what the last two people have said, so
turn to say the same thing a third time. Y'all already heard it. So I figured I would talk instead about stuff that's interesting. But I'm the CEO and founder of Clef, which is just like these fine gentlemen, a way to log in with private public keys instead of logging in with passwords, which, if you're working in Bitcoin, is a no-brainer. It's super awesome. Really cool. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different things. First is that a big challenge for this technology and all technology, and something that we talk a lot about with Bitcoin as well, is distribution. How do we get people to actually pick up the technology we build and go use it in their day-to-day? Dozen other small Bitcoin companies. So it's a problem that we've been tackling for a while, and something that we sort of made a bunch of progress on. And one thing that we have sort of realized as we've talked to a lot of folks and sort of dug into the problem is that security is like this really scary thing. Like anyone talking about security to someone who isn't technical is like immediately the bad person. And it's not because like they think you're going to break their security, but it's because like you're coming at them with like anxiety and like guilt and all the things that like are wrong. Like, people have been telling everyone that passwords are bad for 10 years now. Right? We all know our passwords suck. It doesn't matter how smart you are. You use one password or like a password manager, all your passwords are stored in one place. Someone else controls them. If you don't use a password manager, then you're using something that you can remember, which your brain is not as good as computers are. So it's like we all know that we have like shitty systems. We all know that it's like anxiety inducing. We know when we want to go log in, oh, password for this website. Am I going to type it and get logged out all the times? And so if you come at consumers and you're like, hey, I've got a security thing for you. They're all like, hey, I don't really care because I'm so used to being guilty about this thing. I really don't want to talk to you about that. And so what we've figured out over a long time, a bunch of our users are very non-technical, so it's been important for us to figure out how do we talk to them in a way that's approachable. And a big part of that is to not say like, hey, this is security. Like we've got a page on our website that talks about the algorithm. You can go, if you're like a technical person, you want to dig into like why Clef is awesome. We've got all that for you. But up front, we just say like, fuck passwords. We're going to get rid of your passwords and we're going to make fuck passwords. I want in on that. And so that's been really useful. The other thing is that with new technology, we want to reduce the burden of someone joining as much as possible. So we know that people, to use Clef, you have to download an app, right? Like downloading an app is like a big ask of anyone. Right? Like, a bunch of people will say like, oh, but it's free or whatever. Like, I go to my app store like never. The number of new apps that were on my phone in 2015 is like 4. And so if you want to download, you can download an app. That's like a big ask. But then to log in with Clef, so you have to be pretty tactical about where we ask you to do things and offload as much of the burden from the users as possible. And so the whole sort of experience of Clef is meant to make that burden as light as we can. And so I think that, I love BitID. I don't know, I'm new to your solution, but I think BitID is this phenomenal product that I'd love to see continually develop. I think Clef differs from it in fewer ways than it is similar to it. And the way smartphones, so still no one's holding a copy of your private key, but it does let us do things like make the process between websites much simpler, make it easier for a website to integrate, and when a user signs on, it makes it easy for us to sort of manage the account and create it amongst websites. So there's a little less work there, but that's sort of like, if you're more technical, if you're like a deeply technical person, you understand the tech, there's so much about BitID that's awesome and right, and I again, love the project. And so the differences there are about how to make the onboarding simpler, which has been a research-heavy endeavor. The second thing I want to talk about besides adoption is sort of security paradigms. So we've gone over, we all know private keys, public keys are much more secure than username and passwords. But I think that a really interesting thing to talk about is how increasing the security today, the wallet account is less than 100, right? Like, there's some chance that the person who's typing your username and password isn't you. And so for the banks, that chance, or the chance that someone's swiping your credit card isn't you, is massive, or is a massive expense. They've got thousands of people whose job it is to look at every transaction, or transactions that get flagged as slightly suspicious, and go manually do work to make sure that it was actually you. Look at a signature, which I know it seems like no one's actually looking at your signature when you sign something, but sometimes someone actually goes of something important. And with a better security paradigm, the opportunity to build services that are more strictly tied to who you are is really powerful. So the one that I think about a lot is virtual reality. And I don't know how much y'all are paying attention to like the work being done in virtual reality. But like the idea that we're going to build a personhood like in a computer is really awesome. Like you can have an avatar, and you can go have life, and you can have relationships with people. But the terrifying thing is that if the certainty that that's you is not 100%, like it's really hard to invest that. Like it's hard to have a you that someone else might be running, like a body that someone else runs. And so as I think about virtual reality, I think of all of the necessary like, paradigm shifts that have to be made in order for us to make that leap. And I think that authentication and sort of security is like this really critical component that people aren't like thinking about. We think about like the Internet of Things, like it's all broken. I don't know if y'all have seen that you can just search through for like screenshots of all the security cameras that are totally devices around us. And I think that's really cool and something that I'm more tightly coupled or something that has a much lower uncertainty that it being you enables. The third thing I wanted to talk about, and it's related to that, let me think about it for a second, I just lost my train of thought, is that, well, maybe I just had two things. Is there anything you want me to talk about? Yeah.
Maybe you want me to do Q&A if you remember it during then.
Yeah, I think that's quite right. Sorry, I should have written it down. What? Oh, there's a web password. I
Just did the Google nanny cam.
security. .io, but I can't remember the middle of the domain right now. But what he's doing is what? What?
Stock.
No, not stock. I'm forgetting a lot of things up here.
Passwords.
Exactly. Right. That's why we shouldn't use our memory. So it's currently a controversial thing. It's been in my Twitter feed all day today, but it's been going on for a little while. And I'll look it up when I get back there to what the domain actually is. But it's there's this specific set of cameras that are like nanny cams, and they're broadcasting to your phone, like, hey, I can look in on my nanny right now. But it's doing it with over like an open IP, and it's doing it without a password. So this website is just like scanning through a bunch of traffic and looking for it, and it takes a screenshot of everyone it finds and posts it. And you can't actually like house inside people's homes. And the people who maybe the site are saying, stop letting us publish pictures inside of people's homes. Sounds like someone's going to if you keep it open. Which is like often the case in the security world. It's like people are like, hey, stop hacking our shit. Stop letting us hack your shit. We're just here to make a point until you fix it. Which can be really irritating. It costs a lot of money to fix it. Yeah, I still don't remember the third thing, so we'll do some Q&A, and if I think of it, I'll let you know.
Thanks so much, Pete. We're going to get some of those tools up here. I did want everybody to know, if you didn't hear earlier, we are going to be letting talks after the Q&A. You get a minute to talk about your product, your company, your idea, your favorite Wikipedia page, your favorite boy band. Just sign up in the back, and we'll do it at the end. So,
Sorry, wrong one.
actually, one thing I would ask. First raise your hand, I want micro change. These tools are different from last time. New skills. I got it on the street. I like it. The buttons. All right, here we go.
How does BitID handle man-in-the-middle attacks?
Depends what you mean by man-in-the-middle attacks. The nice thing is that, at least compared to passwords, if a password is transferred unhashed and declared, the only thing that's transferred and declared with BitID is a signed message. So that's the one that's transferred and declared. It's a signature, so you don't give up a private key that would get potentially access to other websites. Now there are, I'll give some of the weak points of that is if the website uses a session token that then allows access to the website repeatedly over and over and over and over again, or if it's an API. So we use BitID as an API as well for mobile device to assert. And if it is session token based, then if someone gets access to that token, it'll at least be good for the duration of that session. I know with APIs we've been bouncing around the idea of just simply signing every single transaction. Like every single send and receive from an API could
Yeah, so the simple answer to that is that when we built Clef, the ECC algorithms weren't that well developed and tested. It felt like that was the eventual future, but not one that we were ready to bet on yet. And we just haven't been convinced that it's time to switch based on the amount of pilot testing. Right? RSA still holds up and has been tested for a long time. ECC is still fairly new. Potential to find the vulnerabilities high. Other than that, I would say that our general, I really think that ECC is like the superior future-facing algorithm, but the time to make the switch is like there's two curves. There's like the one which is that eventually RSA degrades, right? And we want to not be on RSA at the point where RSA is degraded. But on the other hand, I think we're probably at the point where making the switch would make sense, but it just hasn't been a priority for us yet.
Yeah, so it came a little late, so sorry if this was already addressed. But are you guys putting something like BitID systems on blockchain? Is there a blockchain application that's specifically tailored for identity systems? Or is that up and coming?
So it wouldn't make sense to put so users' privacy is already almost squandered. You do want to make this really off-chain. You just want it to be between the user and the site you're authenticating to. We are using technology that's used in the blockchain, which is the ECD algorithms. But permanently recording it is probably something that's there is actually one use case that we are exploring, which is audit. So we are a financial website, and every transaction, every purchase of a futures contract or every sale needs to be recorded. We are looking at factoring, in fact, how we can do that privately. I think it's still a research topic, and in the future, we'll have that answer for you.
So to kind of extend on that answer, BitID actually generates a very different public address for every single site that you would log into. So the callback URL, if you see my slides, will create a hash of your master. It's kind of like an HD wallet, right? Instead of address 123, it's an address. In the same sense, you can't correlate it with a centralized identity, public address, public key to person's name manager. However, there can be an extension to that where we say, okay, if I want to prove that I am Paul Puey, then I can sign with a key that is associated with some central repository for identity, or decentralized like a name coin, but it hasn't been rolled out in much of.
So I was looking at your rotating the identities from, for BitID, where it's a different one for every website, but it's the same public key as far as I can tell. So you're generating a different public-private pair for every website.
Yeah, so you actually use the same master private key that you could use for your Bitcoin wallet, and the derivation scheme, as opposed to being an index, 1, 2, 3, the derivation is derived by the URL of the website. And so from that same master private key, you derive another private key, which you then derive the public key that you'll send to that website for registration. Yes, different public and private keys for every single website, but all derived from the same master.
So I'm not sure if that addresses, but using my private key from my wallet, in theory I have to have some sort of login to get to my wallet. So is that, I would still have to have that.
So it depends on the wallet that you choose. With Mycelium, there's either no login, there's a 6 PIN, or your full username and password. Different devices can implement different types of security, so that's up to you to choose.
But we're still dealing with that methodology, and then on top. And this is saying that I only have one password to worry about, not this other.
The only is if you have one set of kind of initial authentication.
So I'd like to add something to that. So eventually, you probably want to use some sort of hardware somewhere. So if you have a hardware wallet or something you can plug in your computer that will authenticate you based on something that can be measured in the realm of physics. So your fingerprint, for example, is something that's only exists in the physical world. But if you combine a few things, your facial features, your voice print, and so on, you could go to a point where it's automatic. And I think, as we discovered, the users don't want to do anything. Users want it to just happen and just authenticate them. Like, we authenticate each other when we see. We are still, I think, a bit away from that, but there is being work that people are doing which may take us there in a year or so.
I remember my third thing. All right, yeah. So the third thing I was going to say, which I'll go quickly. Hasn't been super talked about up here, is biometric authentication. That we can figure out who you are with your fingerprint or with your retina or your heartbeat, which seems like it would be even cooler than using a private key or public key, because those are sort of complicated compared to things that exist automatically. But in the future of biometric authentication, there's sort of like two paths, and one of them is that Facebook has all of our faces in their thing, and like they have so many videos of all of us that we're all like documented, and Facebook has like cameras on things or whatever. When you want to log in, and we end up in sort of like a minority report world, and there's also like a bunch of security problems. If someone has all of our fingerprints, and we lose our fingerprints, California driver's licenses, then
we can't reset these. We can't like, get a new face, we can't get new fingerprints, or at least they're not cheap. The alternative is that our devices, the ones that are like close to us, that we keep on us all the time, get to know us really well. So like my phone knows my fingerprint, I'm pretty okay with that because like Apple doesn't have a copy, supposedly. Just my phone does. And it may even know like my walk. It may be like, yeah, I've been in his pocket all day, and it's really obvious that it's still him. It might know my heartbeat. It might know a lot of data about me. It would know like if someone else was the one holding my phone. And then my phone has the private key and is able to tell every device around me and say like, hey, I know that B is still the one in possession of that phone. Like, I haven't left him. And today it's our phone is probably the best bet for that. Maybe eventually a watch is really good for that because when you take the clasp off, you can tell that it left your wrist, and you can do heart rate. Eventually maybe it ends up under our skin, which is kind of creepy, but also really cool. I think that a lot of people ask me if biometric authentication is opposed.
I actually have a question about that. If my password gets stolen, I can change my password. If my phone knows my walk, my heartbeat, and my fingerprint, and my voice, and even if it's not centralized, it's just on the phone. If it gets stolen, I can't change that.
Yeah, so the hope is that we can wipe it remotely if we need to. But all of that's really complicated. So I don't know how much y'all have followed the legislation around phone wiping, but there's this whole thing where like California passed a bill saying a phone manufacturer has to make it so you can remotely wipe it if it gets stolen, that it can actually be locked if it gets stolen so they can't sell it. And the idea there is like really well intentioned. Like, you don't want to sell your phone to a thief speaking at me. He doesn't like it. But we don't want we want to reduce the market value of like stolen phones. So if someone steals my phone, I have to be able to lock it. Also for security reasons, because my email's on there and my email's really important because I can reset all my passwords through it. The unfortunate thing is that like if the government has required this shutdown and like Apple is able to shut down all of our phones, Apple and Google, and there's like a subpoena during a protest to like shut down all the protesters' phones, it gets like really creepy. Like we don't want all of our phones to get turned off so that we can't communicate and get like cornered or surrounded or all the things which dystopian things predict will happen if we don't have control. And so I think that account resets and phone lock that's like my fingerprint doesn't get stolen. So a lot of balance there, but interesting.
So let me add something to that. Your heartbeat, fingerprint, so on, they're not passwords, they're usernames. And they should not be used. A password by definition is something you can change. The reason human beings can actually use that for authentication is that we use literally hundreds of these things. And these are not something you can copy in real life. I cannot copy someone else's voice and instantly at will. When the properties in the physical world are transferred to the information world, it loses all the properties of physics. It becomes information which can be copied. You should not rely on biometrics only for any sort of authentication. What you really need to do is not have permanent user IDs. You should create them when you want to use them, and you just want to change them as well. So, like the server side should not need that much of the user's data. This is what this is the only thing that can solve the issue.
Yes, I just wanted to ask how you guys see like the web of trust playing into this kind of thing, as far as resets go, who your friends are, who your family is, if you trust other people to help you reset, stolen credentials or something like that.
Yeah, so I think that the most interesting question around like key-based identity is resets, like who manages it, who does it. And web of trust is like, from a theoretical standpoint, my favorite version. But it's also like very, very, very complex to explain to users. And like it requires like a very fleshed out mesh, right? Like you have to like know who your friends are and how well the various friends like relationships work. So there's a company, BitID. They have done like web of white. It's like, it took me like 3 hours to set up, and then like I still locked myself out twice. I logged in twice. So like I think that there will eventually be a web of trust implementation that is likely the right answer for resets. But I think that we're a long way from figuring out what that should look like in practice, or like how to like educate users about that sort of system.
Quick explanation, if you don't know what web of trust is.
Yeah, so web of trust basically is the idea that trust can be decentralized. So if you look at your certificate authorities, when you go to a website, which is HTTPS, that is centralized trust. That is the certificate authority that basically says, yes, this is the public key of this particular website. In the web of trust, you decentralize. After a certain threshold, you can be fairly certain that the people you trust have, certified this particular entity, and that's basically what web of trust is. So to add to the previous comment, I believe that you really should not need a reset of identities. You would only need it if the server really has information which really belongs to you, and if all the financial information is with you, if you are in control of a Bitcoin wallet, instead of having a credit card and all these other kinds of fiduciary information in the remote site, you actually won't need to reset it. If you extract user information, like preferences and so on, and you store it with yourself, there's nothing to reset. You just create a new BitID or Clef ID or
Expand on that a little bit and try to answer the question, what can we do with respect to reset? Well, actually, we can use another piece of kind of Bitcoin blockchain technology, which is multi-signature technology. And so there's some talk between us and a few other companies to implement multi-sig oracles that currently now sign Bitcoin transactions for wallets, or they can also sign BitID quote-unquote transactions. And that effectively incorporates a third-party cosigner, which can also be the cosigner that decides not to sign if you tell them there's some type of other authentication mechanism that I've lost my keys. Stop signing with that key, I'm going to create a new pair or re-register with the sites. So that's potential to use, once again, technology we already have for multiple purposes. Be aware that once you do incorporate a third party, you incorporate some risk in that party as well. So at least you don't incorporate the risk that they have full control, but you do incorporate the risk that they're even available. So what if they're down? Their website broke, now suddenly you can't log in because you do need one of their keys. So there's but
things that the iPhone sort of led, but it's pretty much common. It's effectively, most people now have a hardware-assisted security system. You talk about biometrics, but the reality is it's a fingerprint sitting on a phone. And that seems to be, for long term, decades ago we had token cards that would rotate. Does it seem like the only real way this, and you get to sort of the final solution to this stuff is there's some hardware-based trusted computing platform that is in the person's possession. Because there's always one password at the end of it. Your master password, your master key, whatever, on your device has to be in your hands. And we're delegating a lot of trust to Apple but effectively that's what we've done is, the great thing with SSH keys is you don't need passwords over the network. The bad thing was if anybody got to your home directory and got to the right subdirectory, they owned you forever.
Right, so I think you brought up the point of whether or not we're centralizing security versus decentralizing and putting it into our devices. And around but easier in the sense that the motivation, the game theory behind hacking into individual devices is much more challenging than a centralized place. So when you create a treasure trove of value, you create a massive incentive. As that treasure trove gains more and more value, becomes more and more incentivized to hackers to attack it.
So that you're
Individual devices become the treasure of that one person, which you have to individually attack.
yeah,
And each device being
that's
selected.
ignoring malware. You know, the fact is we're delegating tremendous amounts of trust.
Correct, malware is not going to affect every single device across the board at all times. So yes,
There are
definitely-
botnets that number in the millions. I can get people's phones in the millions. We rely upon a trusted computing platform right now from Apple.
Well, if you have an Apple device, but there's trusted computing platforms across the board. I'm hoping they show up on our desktops, and that would be a platform that number one doesn't necessarily take incoming connections. It's one thing to try to secure a globally accessible internet server that is 99% of the time is making outgoing connections and not taking is behind a firewall. So if I have to place my bets, on the future being able to secure our devices better than internet servers. Because servers, based on that whole chart that I went up here in the first presentation, are hacked all the time, repeatedly, and there's a huge motivation to do so.
So to answer your question, if you see how a lot of these hardware wallets work, you can initialize them with a set of words, right? So they are hardware, but you're not completely dependent on possession of that hardware. If you lose it,
some time left over to drink, and then afterwards we'll go to local edition. So just going to turn over to one last question, and if you guys have any further follow-up, feel free, of course, to speak.
So just for the sake of fun discussion, some two questions for you guys to think of. One, okay, let's make it quick then. So recently read a book called The Circle by David Hager, and some of you have read it, probably maybe to you account. And since we got to the point of, I guess, aging as a society towards transparency, especially that some of the attractiveness of Bitcoin societies, everything has a track and transparency. The paradox that I'm seeing in this discussion is that we are, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, is that we are opening up to a way for us to have privacy at the no. But that transaction is transparent. What's the point of that? So I'm totally talking about futuristic scenario here. So do you guys see that scenario?
So transparency and privacy are not mutually exclusive. You want to be transparent about the things you want to disclose, things you want to prove to others. You want privacy about the things that you don't want to disclose to such people. So privacy is the ability to control whom you are exposing what to. So to your doctor, you may be happy to tell him you have diabetes. You may not be happy to tell that to like your potential employer who may not hire you, right? So as long as you have the ability to distinguish between, as long as you have the ability to control whom you show what, then transparency is actually very useful. It's just a matter of being able to control it.
Satoshi could write the blockchain where you couldn't see anything, but you could just prove that you made a transaction, it wouldn't happen. And so the privacy piece didn't achieve what it was hoping to achieve, at least for a lot of privacy advocates. I think the transparency isn't a huge value of Bitcoin. What is valuable is that I can prove that I made something. But that doesn't have to be in a public blockchain. If we could cryptographically figure out how to make that not transparent, there's obviously projects for that. So digital currency base as opposed to public or private blockchains. The privacy will increase, the tools will get better for that. But we'll still, based on cryptography, be able to prove that we did something and prove.
Yeah, I have an answer that's a little bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to give it anyway. But I think that this is one of the most terrifying questions for technologists today, is like the amount of information that is being collected about everyone all the time is increasing at an alarming rate. And the ability to use that information to pull out meaningful action and come up with things about the people is also increasing at an alarming rate. Today, Lisa, you get information about all your reservations and stuff in your email just by searching hint words. It's like, wow, that's really useful. But also, you figured out a lot about me just from reading my email all the time. Cool. But I think a solvable issue is I think that when you follow the straight lines from the technology that exists today, like where the future is, you end up in a bunch of scary places. And I think you always have. But the truth is that the future, people of 5 years from now, us in 5 years, will be building using the tools that we invent over the next 5 years. And with the tools we invent over the next 5 years, we'll then be building something new. And that it's so hard to predict change because of that fact. The people of 5 years won't have just 5 years of using the blockchain. They will also have a bunch of new tools that will go on top of the blockchain. You get to use those to invent the next 5 years and so on. And so there's this acceleration of changes that happen, which is scary. But there's also we end up with this trajectory that's very non-obvious, that the things that we end up building don't look like the things we thought we would build given our is the trajectory for today is super scary, and I don't see where we fix it, but I'm also hopeful that the trajectory is less obvious than we think.
And with that, I think it's a very nice end, future looking. I'd like everybody to, again, thanks Paul, Bharath Rao. So we still have lots of beer, so I encourage everyone. Oh yeah, lightning talks, but and then we have 2 lightning talks. So if you sign up for lightning talk, please go ahead and sign. So first we have, it's like Brian. Here you go, Byrne.
You're totally dependent on iPhone being separate.
All right, so we've only got a minute, so this is going to be very quick. I'm Brian Deary. I'm with Factum. I'm based out of Austin, Texas. We're building to it. It collects it together, packages it, virtualizes it, puts it into an opportunity in the blockchain, making our system as reversible as Bitcoin, which is not very. And then it basically creates I call it a mangrove of Merkle trees, lots of segmented free data spaces that you can write your own data to and publish it to basically a global state. And this is what blockchains are good for, having a global state that everyone, if they all agree on the head of the blockchain, they innately agree on everything that it took to get there, which is what the problem that Bitcoin solves. Basically, we're generalizing proof of the negative, which is double spend.
Okay, thank you. So next, we're going to hear about block notary. Right, Stefan.
Blockchain, we use kind of biometrics, identification, and we inspect it. So what we do is automated remote video introduced for particular industries as a way for identity verification. So we have a API for companies to create their own custom video interview that would then be distributed to end customers. And one of the examples would be financial institutions or insurance companies. And you would actually launch a mobile application, turn on the camera, say your identity, show your ID, or any information that actually company needs from you to open bank account, claim, submit an insurance claim. And that helps companies to prevent fraud. It is not replacing the traditional authentication method, but it's an additional layer of security. So yeah, if interested,
So that's our you can help stack chairs, or you can help drink beer, because we have a lot of both. And afterwards, we're going to help, I believe, local issue. All right, thank you. We got to be out here by 9.